I think the one thing that stands out from that whole Springbok tour period is being in Molesworth Street the night the police battened the protesters. And it was the most bizarre scene because I was walking up the road and with a cameraman and looking ahead, all you could see was the strobe light flashing of cameras and these battens coming up and going down on people's heads. And the crowd, the cry of the crowd was like a wounded animal. It was the most amazing thing. And I remember racing out to Avalon because we worked in film and on film in those days, and getting the film processed and cut to go on the late news. And threw this item on. It was the most graphic footage because we had about 2 or 3 cameras there. And put it on the late news and raced home to my flat to see my flatmates and hear their cheers, I suppose, and or their horror at what had occurred. And there they all were, sitting glued to the television set, watching Charles and Diana get married. No one in New Zealand saw the bloody thing. Muldoon's press conferences were quite gruelling. He would not hesitate at any time to take the journalist on and beat the hell out of them verbally. And I learnt to prepare very well, to actually really just prepare on one question. And that was the question I was going to go hard on. And I always used to take a file of papers with me. And I'd ask him the question. And then when he started to reply, I'd open the file and pull out a piece of paper and put it on the top. And he always used to tell journalists, do your homework. And I could see him thinking, he's done his homework by the look of it. I wonder what's in that piece of paper. And it would throw him. And it was a particularly nasty trick, I thought, but it worked. He certainly had an eye for the ladies. I can remember him once at a National Party conference, and I was filming him getting out of, with the cameraman filming him getting out of the lift. And the camera had a sun gun on the top. The cameraman flicked the sun gun on and the doors of the lift opened, and he was standing, Muldoon was standing there with a woman friend, and she had glitter all over her chest. It was that kind of era when women had glitter on their chest. And the end of his nose lit up like a glitter ball when the sun gun went on. I had no idea what he might have been doing in the lift, but however, I think he sort of went face first into, maybe he tripped, maybe he slipped. They were dramatic times with the Lange Douglas fallout. The press gallery and the journalists covering it almost took sides. You know, you could see the Rogenomes in the gallery, and you could see the Langeistas in the gallery as well. And the period became one of extraordinary leaks and breaking stories, and every night on the news, politics was right up the top of the bulletin, because basically producers and editors based in Auckland don't like political stories. If they can possibly avoid them, they will. But those times were so tempestuous that you were sort of constantly lead item, or certainly in that first break all the way through. And it was, I think, the first time that politicians recognised the value of television, how you could use it to lobby, how you could use it to gather support. And the Lange PR machine was an extremely good one, much more effective, I suspect, than Muldoon's had ever been. And it sort of mapped out the way the Parliament and the press gallery and the media spin doctors work. The foundations were laid then. The Ralston Group was really a straight steal from the McLaughlin Group, a program in the United States. And Rod Pedersen, who was the head of news and current affairs at TV3, had been looking at various formats to try a little current affairs chat show of some description. He spotted the McLaughlin Group. I had a look at it, said, excellent. He said, who do you think should front it? And I very cheekily said, me. And bang, you know, we trialled it. We did a couple of dummy runs, and it worked. You know, it was fast-paced. It had some real characters. We tried to, you know, you tried to have right-wing, left-wing, male, female, liberal, conservative, you know, Maori Pākehā, you know. And we had a group of about 10 people who we'd swap around show by show. There was, you know, it was, what, 3 subjects per show. So you hit them fast. You know, you only had 24 minutes on air, but you could really canvass and get real opinions going. And sometimes, it got very heated. I mean, Derek Fox and Richard Griffin, one night on the subject of race and Maori just about came to blows. I mean, two of the most placid people in normal life, but you wind them up on camera and it can get quite interesting. But yeah, it was a good and enjoyable show to do. It did, I think, 5 seasons. Which, much to everyone's amazement. Once I left TV3, TVNZ did pick it up and did a thing called Ralston Live, which was almost exactly the same. And that was pulled because it was only rating a 15, or 25 to 54, which nowadays, they would kill to be able to pull a 15. Backch on TV1 was an art show that was put together by Dave Gibson's Gibson Group. The executive producer was Gordon Harcourt. And it really was Gordon's baby. He tried to apply, and did very successfully apply, current affairs values to an arts show, so that the stories really did have meat in them. And it was a time when the arts are very political anyway, so there was always an argument going on. It wasn't a lot of kaleidoscope type material, if you can remember back to Kaleidoscope with sort of, nice, pleasant music tracks and shots of pots. This was all about, the politics of arts funding, who was on what board. And it was a good show. I think TVNZ were surprised that it actually rated so well, even though it was on some 11:15 after the motor racing on a Sunday night. I had a dispute at one point with a couple of Television New Zealand executives, which actually ended up in a fight, as I remember, physical fight, and strangely it was not renewed after that. I found it very interesting because the culture of the place had changed significantly in the decade or so since I'd been there. Well, I'd left in '89 and I went back, so it would have been at least 12 or 13 years. And there were aspects of what had gone on in the production of their news and current affairs that I didn't like. And I wanted to actually try and get them breaking stories again, particularly at 6 o'clock. It's hard. TVNZ has a strange culture to it. And I don't think anybody goes into TVNZ and becomes a better person. I think quite the reverse. You get in there and you get caught in the wars and the struggles and the fights and the budget cuts, and you end up leaving and discovering yourself again as a normal human being. I don't regret any of the changes that I had to make. I think it actually ended up a stronger news and current affairs operation by the end of it. The one regret I have is that there were just constant budget cuts, which took out entire programs. Judy Bailey's salary, God. Whatever you pay somebody shouldn't actually be a matter of public debate. And I think Television New Zealand at the time had a very weak and spineless board of political appointees. And I can remember going to Wellington when they were hauled publicly before the minister and castigated in a news conference for allowing Judy Bailey to have a salary of that magnitude. The point is, one ratings point on the news is, it would pay for her salary in the year, easily, more than that. You're dealing with extraordinarily large sums of money. In those days, the news budget was about, I think, $50 million a year. It's big business, and it returned in revenue probably, I think it was about 175 million. That's not a bad rate of return. Now, I can never understand the demand for budget cuts, because you would reduce the amount of product and you would reduce its pulling power in terms of ad spend. And if you're getting a more than 300% rate of return, what's the problem? I don't believe there's any true objectivity in journalism. Everybody is biased to an extent by their background, by their education, by their own personal beliefs. The hardest thing to do as a journalist is to try and remain as objective as you can be. John Campbell, is quite happy to talk about his own subjectivity when it gets into stories, and where, how he has particular ideas and attitudes. And I mean, John's to the left of the Labour Party politically and makes no bones about it, saying that. And I think that's good. I think you need to know where, and particularly political journalists, where they're coming from, what they stand for, what they believe in, and I think you can see now on television, though, it would be almost impossible to guess how Duncan Garner voted or how Guy and Espinen voted, and that's a bit of a shame. I don't know whether they've got political principles or not, but if they had some, it'd be nice to hear them occasionally to know what's affecting the way they do the news.